Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're diving into the tech world today, specifically something I know a lot of you are watching, and that's Nvidia's stock.
Yeah, Nvidia, it's been a wild ride.
It has, and we want to make sure you really get what all these recent ups and downs might mean for you, without drowning you in all the complex financial jargon.
Exactly. We're going to break it down nice and easy.
So think of this deep dive as like our mission today is to unpack what just happened with Nvidia's stock and maybe get a glimpse of what the future holds.
And we're going to be focusing on the big picture, not just the little blips.
That's right, the long game. And to guide us on this journey, we've got a fresh article from the Motley Fool published just yesterday, March 25th, 2025.
Always a good source for insights.
For sure. Now, you all know NVIDIA's story, right? I mean, this company's a powerhouse.
Yeah.
Driven by the huge, massive growth of AI.
Oh, absolutely.
We even saw that stock split after the price went way past $1,000 a share.
Crazy, right?
But lately, there's been a bit of a slowdown. Some speed bumps for the stock, you could say. And it seems like those broader economic worries are kind of overshadowing even the bright future of AI.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's this specific technical pattern that the article highlights. It mentions that just last week, Nvidia's stock price triggered something called and get ready for it, death cross.
Okay, death cross. That sounds a bit intense.
Yeah.
For those of us who aren't, experts in all that technical analysis stuff, could you break down what a death cross actually is?
Sure. Imagine it's kind of like a warning sign, like a signal that some traders are watching for to see if there might be some negative movement coming.
Okay.
It's when a stock's 50-day moving average, basically its average price over the last couple of months, dips below its 200-day moving average, which is its average over a longer time.
Okay, so it's comparing the short-term trend to the long-term trend.
Got it. Yeah. And it's one of the tools analysts use to try and figure out where a stock might go in the near future. But it's important to remember that those moving averages, there are a lot of different ones, and sometimes they tell different stories.
Right.
It's just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like the short-term trend line crossing below the long-term one, which could mean, like you said, some downward pressure coming.
Mm-hmm.
And the article says this happened to NVIDIA just recently, like middle of March 2025.
Yeah, just last week. And what makes this kind of interesting is that it's been almost 3 years since the last time NVIDIA's stock had a death cross.
Wow.
And for a company that's been growing so much, that's a pretty long time without this signal.
Yeah, for sure. So this is where it gets really interesting, right? The article takes a look back at what happened the last few times NVIDIA's stock had a death cross.
Yeah, let's see what history tells us. Well, the most recent one before this was back in April 2022. And what happened after that, according to the article, is kind of what the death cross is supposed to predict. NVIDIA's stock dropped quite a bit, about 45% for the rest of that year.
Whoa, 45%? That's a lot.
It is. And that big rebound after that 2022 drop might have been because of their strong earnings reports that kept coming out and new products in the AI field, stuff that the death cross wouldn't pick up on.
Right, those underlying factors.
Exactly.
So it wasn't a one-time thing either, right? There was another time this pattern happened.
Oh, yeah. If you go back a bit further, November 2018, NVIDIA had another death cross then. And the market reacted kind of similarly, but it took a bit longer to play out.
Okay.
The stock price went down by more than 40% in the 9 months that followed that one.
So looking at just those two times, it's understandable why some investors might be a little worried seeing this death cross again. It seems like history is telling us there could be some rough waters ahead.
Yeah, if you're only looking at those technical signals, it might seem that way. But this is where it's super important for long-term investors to think bigger, to see what those technical signals don't show.
Right. So for those of us who are in it for the long game, why shouldn't we freak out about a death cross?
Well, the main reason is that technical analysis, that's all about spotting short-term trends in the stock price, like what happened in the past. It's trying to guess where the price might go in the next few days or weeks based on those patterns.
Makes sense.
But it doesn't look at the actual value of the company, like how much money it makes, how much debt it has, how good its management is, or how it stacks up against the competition.
Or it doesn't see the whole picture.
Exactly. So someone who's trading stocks every day might use these signals, but for someone who's thinking years ahead, it's really just a tiny part of the story.
So it's important to zoom out and look at the whole picture, not just the little blips.
Exactly. If you only focus on these technical signals, you could miss out on big gains in the long run. Market sentiment, how people feel about the market, can change really fast because of things that have nothing to do with those charts and graphs.
Right. Totally.
Like the article gives a good example. Imagine the government changes some policies, things like tariffs or trade deals.
Yeah.
That could suddenly change everything for a big company like Nvidia, no matter what those moving averages are doing.
That's a really good point. And the article also mentions something else that's pretty important, which is how hard it is to time the market perfectly.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, trying to buy or sell at the absolute best moment, like when the price is at its lowest or highest, just using those technical signals, it's really tough.
And more often than not, you end up sitting on the sidelines, missing out on big opportunities while you're waiting for that perfect moment that might never even happen. Like, I remember back in 2020 when the pandemic hit, there were all these crazy technical signals. People who panicked and sold based on those, they missed out on the huge recovery that came after.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I got to have a long-term vision.
So we've talked about the short-term signals and why we shouldn't get too caught up in them if we're playing the long game. Now, let's talk about that long-term perspective. What does the article say about NVIDIA's strengths, the stuff that could be even more important than those short-term blips?
This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
The article talks about how NVIDIA is like a leader in the AI world.
Right.
And it's not just hype. Almost all the analysts agree that the AI market is going to explode in the next few years.
It feels like AI is just like everywhere now.
It's everywhere.
It's crazy. And the article, there's a data point that really shows how big this is becoming.
Yeah, it mentions that Amazon's cloud computing division, their revenue run rate was a whopping $115 billion last year. And a big chunk of that growth was from all these companies starting to use Amazon's AI products.
Wow. So there's real money being poured into AI already.
Absolutely. And that benefits companies like Nvidia directly because they provide the hardware and software that makes all this AI stuff work.
Right. They're like the backbone of it all. And speaking of strong performance, the article also talks about NVIDIA's own financial track record. And it's pretty impressive, right?
Oh, yeah. They're making serious money. They've had a gross profit margin of over 70% in recent quarters. That means they're keeping a lot of the money they make after paying for the costs of making their products. That gives them tons of resources to invest in new research and development, making them even more competitive and innovative.
So they can keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with AI.
Exactly.
And how about their stock valuation? How the market sees the company's worth right now. What does that look like?
Well, this is kind of interesting. Even though Nvidia stock has done really well over the past few years, the article says their current valuation is actually looking more reasonable now. It's trading at about 25 times its estimated earnings for the next year.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, that number was closer to 50, so the recent dip in the stock price has made it look a lot more attractive from a value perspective.
So even though we're seeing that death cross causing some concern in the short term, it sounds like the company's in a really good position overall. And the potential for the AI market. I mean, that's huge.
Oh, yeah, huge. And to really emphasize this long-term perspective, the article goes back to those previous times when the death cross happened. Remember, we talked about how the stock went down right after, but then things got really interesting.
It happened.
Well, after that April 2022 death cross and that 45% drop, Nvidia's stock didn't just stay down. It bounced back big time. Over the next 18 months, it went up by more than 85%.
Whoa. So even after a big drop, it more than recovered.
Oh, yeah. It just shows how misleading those short-term technical signals can be if you don't look at the bigger picture.
Totally. And that 2018 death cross, that had a similar ending, didn't it?
Yep. After that over 40% drop following the death cross in November 2018, Nvidia's stock actually went on to climb by about 140% over the 2 years that followed.
So basically what these examples are telling us is that for a company like Nvidia, a company that's got strong financials and is in a market that's just booming.
Yeah.
Those downturns, those blips, they might just be temporary.
Exactly.
So for you listening, here's the key takeaway. While a death cross might seem like a reason to worry, it could actually be a good opportunity if you're thinking long term, especially for a company like Nvidia, which is leading the way in this exciting new world of AI.
Right. The article suggests that some smart investors might see this death cross not as a time to sell, but as a chance to buy shares in Nvidia at a better price.
Interesting.
It's almost like a contrarian move. This scary signal could actually be a sign of a great opportunity down the road.
So let's wrap this up. What are the most important things our listeners should remember from this deep dive into Nvidia stock and these historical patterns?
The main points are: that recent death cross with Nvidia stock, that's a technical indicator that has historically come before short-term price drops. However, if you're investing for the long haul, you should be paying more attention to the company's strong position in the AI market, which is growing like crazy, and its history of bouncing back strong after these kinds of technical events.
Yeah, those are the things to focus on. It really shows how important it is to not get caught up in the day-to-day ups and downs.
Yeah.
Keep your eye on the prize, that long-term potential, especially for a company that's at the forefront of a game-changing industry like AI.
This all leads to a really important question for you to think about. How do these short-term signals, things like the death cross, really affect how people feel about the market?
Right.
And how can understanding both these short-term indicators and the long-term value of a company give you a better, maybe even smarter way to look at investment opportunities?
I think that's a great question to leave our listeners with. Really makes you think.
Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
And until next time, keep diving.